"I'd rather die than be yours," Apache woman said. When the cowboy cut her chains at dawn, the desert stretched for miles, endless and harsh, swallowing every sound except the low groan of wind pushing through the canyon. The cowboy rode alone, a man with too much past and too little future. His horse's hooves hit the dry earth with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat, slow, tired but alive. He had seen enough blood and betrayal to know peace was a myth. But still he rode, chasing something he couldn't name. The sun had barely risen when he found the burned-out remains of a camp. Smoke still lingered in the air. The sand darkened with ashes and memories. He dismounted, scanning the scene carefully. That's when he saw her, chained to a post, half hidden in shadow, her wrists bleeding against cold iron. She was young, her long black hair tangled with dust, her face painted with faint marks of her tribe. Her eyes, though, were not of a captive. They burned with pride, hate, and something more dangerous: dignity. The cowboy froze, watching her breathe, steady and slow, like she had already accepted death. The men who had left her here were long gone, likely thinking she'd never be found. He approached quietly, his boots crunching on gravel. She didn't flinch. When he crouched and looked into her face, he saw no fear, just defiance. Without a word, he pulled a knife from his belt and cut the chain connecting her to the post. She didn't thank him. She didn't move either. He gestured toward his horse, offering water. She stared at him, lips dry, eyes full of accusation. Finally, she took the flask, drank a few sips, and turned her head away. He could tell she hated accepting help, but thirst had no pride. He didn't speak much. He wasn't a man of words. But as the day grew hot and the sand burned their boots, he knew he couldn't just leave her. They traveled in silence for miles. Every time he tried to say something, her silence answered louder. When night fell, he built a fire and offered her food. She ate without looking at him. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, yet she never let her eyes drop. He noticed how she kept watching the horizon, like she expected someone from her tribe to appear out of the dark. But he knew the truth, no one was coming. 2 days passed this way. The cowboy began to understand her silence. It wasn't arrogance. It was grief. She had lost her people, maybe her family, maybe more. Her heart was buried somewhere in that burned-out camp, but her spirit was still alive. On the third day, they reached an abandoned outpost near a canyon ridge. He stopped the horse and turned to her. "You can stay here tonight," he said softly. She didn't answer. The cuffs still hung on her wrists, a reminder of the cruelty she'd endured. He hesitated, then stepped closer. She backed away slightly, her body tense, ready to fight. "Easy," he murmured, reaching for the chain with slow hands. She didn't move as he gripped the metal link and twisted it. The lock gave a dull click, then fell apart. The sound was small, but it echoed like thunder. She looked at her freed wrists, then at him. For a moment, something like gratitude flickered in her eyes. Then it vanished. She straightened her shoulders and spoke for the first time, her voice trembling but fierce. "I'd rather die than be yours." The words hit him harder than a bullet. He froze, the chain still dangling from his hand. He wanted to tell her he didn't want to own her, that he was just trying to make things right. But the words refused to come out. She turned away, her back straight, her pride shining like steel in the sunlight. He saw then that she wasn't just a woman freed from chains. She was the embodiment of something pure, freedom itself. He stayed silent as she walked a few paces away, staring into the desert like she could already see her lost world waiting for her. The cowboy bent down, picked up the broken chain, and tossed it aside. He didn't call her back. He just watched her walk until her steps slowed, her legs trembling with exhaustion. For the first time, he realized she was running, not just from him but from everything that reminded her of pain. That night she didn't sleep. He saw her silhouette by the dying fire, hands rubbing her wrists, eyes reflecting the flames. He wanted to tell her she was safe, but somehow he knew safety wasn't what she wanted. She wanted her dignity, her revenge, her home, things no man could give back. As the first light of dawn touched the canyon, he saw her glance toward him briefly. Her face softened, just for a second, before turning back to the horizon. He didn't know it then, but those words, "I'd rather die than be yours," would burn in his memory forever, shaping everything that was yet to come. By the time the sun climbed high again, the cowboy had decided to follow her from a distance. She didn't want his help, but he knew the land was unforgiving. He watched her stumble across the sand, determined but weak. When she finally collapsed near a dry riverbed, he went to her quietly, lifting her gently and giving her water. She tried to push him away, but her strength was gone. Her eyes met his, those same fierce eyes, but this time there was no hate, only exhaustion. He carried her to shade and waited until she opened her eyes again. When she woke, she spoke her name for the first time. Nayeli. He repeated it softly, the word foreign but beautiful. In broken English, she told him fragments of her story. Her village burned, her brother killed, her people scattered. The men who chained her had slaughtered everything she loved. The cowboy sat in silence, guilt eating him alive. Once, not long ago, he had ridden with men who might have done the same. He left them because he couldn't stand the screams anymore. He didn't tell her that. Some truths were too heavy to speak. Days turned into weeks. They rode together, not as friends, not as enemies, just two survivors bound by the same land. Sometimes she would hum a song from her tribe, soft and haunting. Sometimes he'd listen to the wind and wonder if this was what redemption felt like. Slowly, the silence between them turned into understanding. He taught her to handle a revolver. She taught him how to read the land, where the snakes slept, how to find water in dry soil. They began to trust each other, though neither would ever admit it aloud. One night, as they camped near the cliffs, she asked him why he saved her. He stared into the fire and said, "Because I couldn't stand watching another soul die for no reason." She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "No one saves without reason." He didn't answer. Their fragile peace shattered. One evening when a group of bounty hunters found them, gunfire ripped through the silence. The cowboy drew his gun instantly, pushing Nayeli behind a rock. She fought beside him, her rifle steady, eyes blazing. They fought like two storms colliding, each shot echoing with rage and defiance. He was hit once, then twice, but kept firing until the last man fell. When it was over, the world was quiet again, except for the sound of his ragged breathing. Nayeli knelt beside him, pressing her hands to his wound. He looked up at her face, the woman who once said she'd rather die than belong to him, and smiled faintly. "Guess I'm yours now," he whispered. Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "No," she said softly. "You are free." He smiled again, weaker this time. "So are you." His eyes closed, and with the rising sun, his breath faded into silence. She sat there for a long time, the wind carrying strands of her hair across his face. When she finally buried him near the canyon, she placed the broken chain beside his grave, a symbol not of bondage, but of what he had broken inside himself. Nayeli stood there for hours, her shadow stretching across the sand. Then she turned away, walking toward the horizon. She didn't look back. Her steps were steady, her heart scarred but strong. She was free, not because someone freed her, but because she had never let herself be owned. The wind carried her song through the valley, the same one she had sung by the fire, echoing across the canyon walls. And in that song lived the memory of the man who tried to give her back what the world had stolen, her freedom, her pride, her right to choose her own destiny. She vanished into the golden light, leaving behind nothing but silence, a grave, and a legend born from pain and courage. The story of the woman who said, "I'd rather die than be yours," and meant it with every heartbeat of a soul that